Session start. We start. Okay.
Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Sophie Heiers, a young colleague from the Scandinavian department, and also a colleague in runes, our long-term project of runic writing. And Sophie just finished her doctoral thesis. Was a wonderful piece of work to read, and I learned a lot. And Sophie is, as I said, part of runes in the Scandinavian department, and she's a specialist on stones.
Yes. I will share my presentation, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a second. Okay, you can
okay.
share it. Yeah, sorry.
Wait. Okay. Yes, you should see it now, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for the introduction, Gabi, and thank you for inviting me to your to your seminar. And thank you all for being here. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about Viking Age runestone inscriptions and what they can tell us about the religion, the process of Christianization of Scandinavia. And I have structured my talk the following way, as you can see. So first, I will give you an introduction to the runic writing system and the Viking Age runestone tradition. Next, so that we get a little bit of a historical context in which runestones have been erected and how the Christianization of Scandinavia has did undergo. I will give a very short overview of the historical context of Viking Age Scandinavia and the process of Christianization. And then the main part of my talk is divided into two sections. So first we will see examples of Christian elements on runestones, and afterwards we will ask the question whether there were also pagan elements present. And I want to show you that the Viking Age runestones are a valuable source to see how Scandinavia and the Scandinavian population dealt with the increased influence of the Christian world. So now let's look at runes. So something general. So the runic writing system was used by the Germanic peoples and is attested on portable objects made out of metal, bone, wood, as well as on stone. It provides the oldest genuine evidence of the early Germanic language, and in total we have around 6,500 runic finds. And our earliest verified runic find is the Vimor scroll that dates around 160 AD. And its inscription, I don't know if you see that. Yes. So it's up there and it says Harja from here, Harja, and can be translated as warrior and probably was a personal name. But with the recent new find in Norway, we have a new candidate which can be maybe even older and is a runestone that was found in a layer which can be archaeologically dated between the year 0, and 200. So we don't know. The media hype was great, but we have maybe the oldest, even older inscription. So in the beginning, the runic writing system called the Odafutha consisted of 24 runic signs that covered the 24 phonemes of the Germanic language, which meant that the writing system was pretty much a perfect fit. And this system was used until major sound changes like syncope, umlaut, or breaking led to a variety of more new sounds, which then required a new writing system. To get you oriented, the following map here shows all runic inscriptions written in the older Futhag, where the majority is attested in Scandinavia. I have left the British Isles out, but for like Scandinavia, these are all the inscriptions in the older Futhag. So this development of the new emerging writing system was in Scandinavia contradictory to what to expect and to the development of the language. So instead of adding more runic signs to cover new emerging sounds, as for example in England is happening, the runic row was now reduced to only 16 signs. So we have from 24 signs, we now only have 16. This development is unique in the history of writing system, and the reasons that lie behind that are not yet fully explained. But the younger Futhag is used from around 700 till 750 until 1050, 1125, a period which is also called the Viking Age, and that's the one we're dealing in this talk. So the inscriptions written in the younger Futhag, its distributions again mainly in Scandinavia, but we have finds also present on the British Isles, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, basically all over Europe. And the writing system was used for inscriptions on rune-stones, but also portable objects and coins, like also a variety of objects. So what is the Viking Age? So the Viking Age, we call a period between 700 and 1066. And the Viking Age period is marked by historians by two events. So we have the first attested Viking attack on the Lindisfarne monastery, which is described in great detail in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and is dated to 793. So this date marks the beginning or the historical beginning of the Viking Age. Certainly there may have been attacks before that time, but this is the first one we have where we have written sources about. So the description in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle has shaped our modern image of the Vikings today and also in the past. But of course, it is a bit biased. It was written down from the point of view of the monks, which were attacked by the Vikings. It's a very colorful description. So it says the year 793. Here were dreadful forewarnings come over the land of Northumbria, and who wholly terrified the people. These were amazing sheets of lightning and whirlwinds, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. A great famine soon followed these signs, and shortly after, in the same year, on the 6th day before the Ides of January, the woeful inroads of heathen men destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne Island by fierce robbery and slaughter. So that's the first attested description of a Viking attack, which marks the Viking Age. So two other events mark the end of the Viking Age, which are two battles. Both happen in 1066. One is the Battle of Stamford Bridge between English and Norwegians, the English under King Harald Godwinson and the Norwegians under Harald Hårderåde, and the Norwegians lose. And another battle is the Battle of Hastings, which marks the Norman conquest by William the Conqueror. When we look at the Viking Age from a linguistic and runological point of view, we would date the Viking Age between 700, 750 and 1050, 1150. And it's basically marked by the first attestations of inscriptions in the younger Futhag, so the short rune row with 16 runes, and ends with the end of the rune-stone tradition and the acceptance of Christianity. And depending on where we are geographically, it ends 1050, for example, in Denmark, and 1150 in Sweden. So I've talked a lot about runestones, and runestones and runestone inscriptions are the largest group of Viking Age inscriptions. In Denmark, we have around 220 inscriptions, in Norway around 60, and in Sweden we have over 2,500 inscriptions on the runestones. So here I have another map, so you can orientate yourself. So you can see around Stockholm, here the big blob. There are I don't know, like every few hundred meters you can find a runestone, but we also have them in Denmark. This is Scania. This is the province where I have written my dissertation about. And then we have here the Danish islands, Bornholm, Gotland, and also a few in Norway. So what are Viking Age runestones? The inscriptions are mostly memorial inscriptions, which follow a certain formula. They are called, so it always says X raised this stone in memory of Y. I have an example here on the right side. You can see, 1 second. Yeah, so it starts around here and goes this way and there. It's Holmby stone, also a stone from Scania in southern Sweden. And it says, Svein raised these stones in memory of Thorgeir, his father. And this inscription dates between 970 and 1020. And it says here, these stones, this means we had this stone which was inscribed, and probably there were other stones maybe put into a circle which constitute the whole monument. So this must have been a big monument Svein erected for his father. So, oops. Yeah. So problems with the runestone inscription is both determining their original location as well as their function, which both is not trivial. It's not a trivial task. The reasons are manifold. So first, their original location is often unknown. This is because these large stones were often used later for building churches. So they were put into churches, and so we don't know where their original location was, but however, not all stones had a secondary use, and some are still in their original placement. And when we look at the stones' primary and secondary placement, we can see that a large proportion is located in close proximity to burial grounds. Runestones were also often found near larger roads, bridges, and along streams. Others were placed on elevated positions, such as burial mounds. And even though their socio-cultural context is also not yet fully understood based on their placements as well as on the formulaic inscriptions, it can be somewhat approximated. So the stones served mainly as memorial stones, but at the same time were symbols of status and display of power. And by mentioning family ties such as fathers or brothers, they also reflect patterns of inheritance and succession. Yeah, so that is the overview of runestones, very short. And before we take now a look at various inscriptions and runestones in more detail, and to assess whether they reflect Christians and or pagan elements, we need some historical context, and especially the Christianization of Scandinavia. And as I already told you, the process is long and complicated. It takes time, and depending on the geographical area, it takes over 100 years of really accepting Christianity. I will present you the different stages and key moments. And I begin with the region, what is today Denmark, following with Norway, and ending with Sweden. So already around 700 first missionary attempts have already been made, for example, by Willibrord, but have failed. Our key source regarding the Christianization of Scandinavia is Vita Ansgari, which has been written around 865, probably by Rimbert. And it tells us about several attempts during the 9th century made by Ansgar as well as Rimbert himself. All of them fail, even though short-lived establishments of churches in Hamburg, Birka in Sweden, and Heidebo in Denmark are made, but they are not really progressing, and they don't stay there. So the Archbishop Unni of Hamburg-Bremen resumes missionary activity, and eventually this results in inspiring the Danish king Harald Bluetooth to embrace Christianity, and the king Harald is baptized around the year 960. And this event is recorded in the sources, for example, by Widukind of Corvey. And finally, in the 11th century in Denmark, Christianity becomes consolidated under Canute the Great. So in the 11th century, Denmark is basically the establishment of the Christian church has been attempted. What's happening in Norway? In Norway, we have 3 kings that play an important role in the process of accepting Christianity as religion. First, we need to mention Håkon the Good, who is baptized and raised as a Christian at the court of Athelstan in England. In 940, he returns to Norway, but he keeps his faith a secret due to the public resistance of the Christian religion. Then we have King Olaf Tryggvason. He also converts to Christianity in England and arrives in 995 in Norway. Also, his aim is to establish a unified Christian kingship, but again faces a strong resistance from the population. And at last, we have King Olaf, the Norwegian king, who is later called Saint Olaf. He also returns from England as a Christian, and he decides to promote conversion of Norway through force and issues the so-called Gulathingspok, a Christian law codex, and which is also the basis of the Norwegian church organization. And what about Sweden? The process here lasts about 100 years longer than in Denmark and Norway. So already in Denmark and Norway, this process is very slow, and we have a lot of setbacks. And Sweden, it's even more complicated, which is also due to a persistent resistance from the population. There are several conflicts between different groups in Sweden. For example, the Christian kings, Christianized Swedes versus the pagan Swedes. So during the 10th century, Eric the Victorious adopts Christianity and he permits missionary activity. His son, Olaf Skødkonung, commits himself to Christianity and fully Christianity. He's also accepted by the pagan Swedes and the Geats, so both groups, which then led to a gradual spread of Christianity throughout the 11th century. So you can see it all takes a bit longer in Sweden. As the slide shows, the Christianization of Scandinavia is very complex, and I divide it into several phases. I've tried to give you a very brief overview. But what is important and what we have to remember is, even though it's complicated and there has always been early contacts with Christianity, Christianity was always around. Example, for example, through the context of with England. And these contexts and the long process result partly in also in pragmatic responses. For example, the use of the so-called primsigning, primsigning, which I will come to later. And it also becomes from that evident that runestones are presumably no pagan monuments, especially in the for example, in the Viking Age. So so as I said, we don't think there are a lot of pagan elements. So let's see for ourselves, and we will take a look at the Christian elements that are attested on runestones. So as I mentioned earlier, the king Harald Bluetooth is baptized in the year 960. So that is the Danish king. And we don't only know this because of the Britain's historical sources of Widukind, but Harald himself announces it in the form of a runestone monument, which we can see here. It is called the Big Yelling Stone, which is sometimes also called Denmark's baptismal certificate. So it's a very important monument also today for the Danes. So I think this picture is on the Danish passport. So it's a very identification monument for the Danes. This is also the first time the names Denmark and Norway are mentioned in the Norse written sources. And this monument dates between 965 and 970. So we remember Harald was baptized around 960. And so this is a few years later, he commissioned this monument. And as we also can see here, it consists of 3 sides, all attest runes. So we have runes here, the larger side, we have runes down here and there, and as well as additional iconography, especially here and here. What does the inscription read? So I've put here the transliteration, so the runes transliterated into Latin letters, and then the translation. So it says, King Harald ordered these monuments made in memory of Gorm, his father, and in memory of Thurve, his mother. So you see the formula, the Viking Age formula, the Viking Age runestone formula, a bit deviated from the normal one, but still there. That Harald, who won for himself all of Denmark and Norway, so he is a leader of Denmark and Norway, and that's the important part on the last side, on side C, and made the Danes Christian. So he says he was baptized and then he made the Danes Christian. So this monument is therefore a clear statement of accepting the Christian faith. And the human-like figure here, you can see here, is also often interpreted as Christ on the cross. Even though there are some scholars who have other interpretations, so some say it might have also be Odin, but since it is above the line which says, and made the Danes Christian, it surely might be also a Christian iconography and is Christ on the cross. So this is the oldest and the first mention that Christianity has officially arrived in Scandinavia. However, there are also not so official inscriptions like commissioned by a king that tell us in an implicit way about the advent of Christianity. So on an inscription from Uppland in Sweden, we hear about a person that has the stone raised in the spirit of their son Einar, who died in Hvitavaudum, which can be translated as christening robes in Denmark. So we have runic evidence that Vikings or people from Scandinavia went to get themselves baptized. The term Hvitaváðum and the christening robes are not only mentioned on rune-stones, but we can also hear about them in chapter 24 of the Vita Ansgari. And it says there, so many others also, both men and women, followed their example, and having abandoned the superstitious worship of idols, and now believed in the Lord and were baptized. There was, moreover, great joy in that place, as the men of this place could now do what was before forbidden. And traders both from here, that is Hamburg, and from Dorset freely sought to visit the place. Schleswig and opportunity was afforded for doing much good here. And whilst many who were baptized there have survived, an innumerable host of those who were clothed in white have ascended to the heavenly kingdom. For they were willingly signed with the cross in order to become catechumens, and that they might enter the church and be present at the sacred offices. But they deferred the reception of baptism, and as they judged that it was to their advantage to be baptized at the end of their life, so that, having been cleansed by the water until salvation, that they might be without any delay enter the gates of eternal life, as those who were pure and spotless. This section about Vita Ansgari tells us about the pragmatic approaches the Vikings had with the Christian faith. So what they did was, because they could only trade with Christians when they became Christians themselves, or at least do the primsigning, the prima signatio, they did that. So they got the cross, the symbolic turn towards Christianity, but delayed the actual baptism till later on. So by showing a symbolic turn toward Christianity, for example, with the use of the cross, they were able to trade with the Christian merchant. And the white clothes were worn by the convert during the baptism and for 1 week afterwards. And sometimes we have sources that sometimes that was such a success that there are instances of Vikings doing that over and over again. In total, we have around 7 inscriptions that mention those white garments, including those 2 individuals that were baptized in Denmark and then died. And the cross as a symbol of Christ is also often found on rune-stones, especially in Uppland, but also in Denmark and Norway, and was often added later without explicit Christian wording. So there was the normal rune-stone formula, and then later, we have instances later where the cross was added. So we can see here a movement towards Christianity. Another Christian element, which is very often on Viking Age rune-stone, is the mentioning of building bridges in the context of Christianity. So we have another example here. It's Frösen stone that was commissioned by Østmaður, and it says, Østmaður, Guðfasta's son, had this stone raised and this bridge made, and he had Jämtland, which is a region in Sweden, Christianized. And then it says, Asbjörn made the bridge, Jerome and Stein carved these runes. Also, this inscription can be read as a public announcement to the others that he converted to Christianity, similar to Harald's stone, but not as monumental as the one by Østmaður. But we see here a public announcement, and we also see the cross in the middle of the stone. And another example which mentions a bridge and has a clear Christian context is a stone in Norway, the Dynna stone. Here we have an inscription which was commissioned by a mother for her daughter. So Gunvor, Thutharic's daughter, made these bridges in memory of her daughter Ástríði. She was the handiest maiden in Havelland. And the inscription also mentions the building of a bridge. What's really interesting here is the iconography on the stone itself, because it depicts the adoration of Christ by the three magi. So we have down there we have a little house. You can see it here, and then we have here three people on a horse, which are the three magi, and then we have the star up here, and then I think that's an angel or something. Yeah, but this is a depiction of the adoration of the three magi. So clearly a Christian iconography. But what do bridges have to do with Christianity? Why is building bridges has something to do with Christians? So first of all, it is suggested that bridge building was promoted during the missionizing period. So the missionaries came and built bridges and improved the infrastructure. And but there are also some examples that have a phrase that the bridge was built to redeem one's soul. So gera brú þessa fyrir sál sína. So to build the bridge to redeem the soul. And what we also can see is that a lot of the bridge inscriptions, like the dinner stone we just saw, are commissioned or initiated by women, which suggests that they had an important role in the Christianization process of Scandinavia. And the concept of the bridge building is often associated with the concept of a bridge to the afterlife. So bridges and Christianity have a strong connection. And especially with the late Viking Age runestones in Sweden and in Denmark, we have a formula added to the normal formula of the memorial inscriptions, which is also clearly Christian. It is the formula says, "May God well help their souls." And also these stones are often depicted with crosses, and have a really nice example here. This is also from Scania in southern Sweden. And it says, "Svein and Thorgauter or Thorgun made this monument in memory of Mani and Sveini. May God well help their souls, and they lie in London." So it's also the first mentioning of the town, of the city or town London in England. And apparently Mani and Sveini, they both died in London, in England, and Svein and Thorgauter erected the monument in memory, and they added this, so they might have been Christian already. It says, "May God well help their souls," and you can see here also a cross in the inscription. The interesting thing is that the first part, so the normal Viking Age runestone formula, is on one side, and the "May God well help their souls, and they lie in London" is on that side with the cross. So it can be suggested that this part was added later on, but we don't know exactly. Okay, to sum up, the Viking Age runestones are a valuable source to understand the process of Christianization of Scandinavia. Both the inscription text as well as the iconography reveal different stages in the spread and adoption of Christianity during the Viking Age. The question now is, do we even have pagan elements on the Viking Age runestones? Or are they purely Christian? I can tell you we have pagan elements on the runestones, and in the next few minutes I will show you some examples of those and discuss the function. So what we have a lot is there are several runestone inscriptions that mention the Norse god Thor in a certain way. I've collected 4 examples here, and we have next to the usual memorial formula a Thor hallow formula. So we have on Glaundrup, it says Thor viki sathi runa, make Thor hallow these runes. We also have this on Sønderkirkeby, here in a form. Here's the normal inscription, and here we have the Thor, may Thor hallow runes. Then we also have sometimes deviation, for example, may Thor hallow this monument, or just Thor viki, may Thor hallow. Sometimes we don't only have this formula, but sometimes it's a bit more hidden, and we have, similar to the crosses, we have little Thor's hammers. For example, on that stone, that's a Danish rune stone, the Labor stone, and it has in total 3 Thor hammers. So you can see them here. There's one, and then there's one, I think, on that side, somewhere there, and then on the other side. So in total, there on that stone, there are 3 different Thor's hammers. And what is a Thor hammer? It's often worn as an amulet. So Thor's often depicted with a hammer, so his hammer Mjolnir. And there are archaeological finds with an amulet, often worn around the neck. They are like this big. This was found in Denmark, in Møn. And so we have a lot of these little hammer amulets found, and also put on rune stones. So the question scholars have asked themselves, are those mentionings of 4 remnants of the old Germanic or old pagan faith? The scholar Hultgård thinks so, and he argues that the use of the hammer symbol and the Thor formula is a genuine old Scandinavian cult formula, and it indicates that like a vigorous veneration of Thor lasting from the oldest time to the late Viking Age, so that Thor was a god of consecration. That could be the case, but on the other side, one has to ask the question, what does Thor actually have to do with runes in the literary sources? And has Thor always been a god of consecration? And when we look in the literary sources, we have the Eddic poem Hávamál, and there we learn that the god Odin has the knowledge about runes, and that he gets the knowledge about runes. So it's Odin and not Thor who is associated with runes. And it says in verse 138 and verse 139, Odin, I know that I was hanging on a windswept tree 9 whole nights, gashed with a spear, and given to Odin, myself to myself on the tree, of which no one knows from roots of what it originates. Odin, they did not harm me with a loaf or a horn of ale. I peered down, prying, I caught up runes, crying out in triumph, I caught them. So here Odin gets the runes. Back I fell from beyond. So from the literary sources, from the mythological tales, which were of course written down in the 12th, 13th century, but have been orally transmissioned throughout the times, it's Odin and not Thor who's associated with runes. So there is evidence that the mentioning of Thor with the ability to consecrate something are relatively young. So there's a historian, Snorri, from the Middle Ages, and he mentions it in 2 places. We don't have it in the older literary sources, for example, in the account of Baldur's funeral, and he says there, Thor stood and blessed the pyre with Mjolnir. So we have a mentioning of Thor and the ability to consecrate something in a bit younger sword, but not in the oldest ones. So Edith Marrott, a runologist, argues that Thor's ability to consecrate is not an ancient trait, but a late development in Old Norse religion, which arose through contact with Christianity, based on parallels between Thor and the Christian god, and especially between hammer and cross, and was influenced by Christian consecration practices. So the consecration practices in Christianity was adopted or put on to Thor. And so the formula Thor consecrate these runes represents therefore an attempt to infuse old tradition with new religious ideas, so a sort of syncretism. So there are other examples where Thor continued to function as a powerful ritual figure in Scandinavian culture, also in a Christian context. Here in a British or English manuscript in Cotton Caligula, dating to the 12th century, beginning of the 12th century, we have a small charm written in runes in the margins, where Thor is invoked in a healing ritual. It says, Gurus wound tap, you go now, you are found. May Thor hollow you, Lord of the ogres. Gurus wound tap against pus in the vein. So it's a healing charm against blood poisoning. So this Thor may help Thor hallow formula is a sign of maybe converting Thor through the influence of the Christian religion. But you also have on some rune stones, Thor is depicted fishing for the Midgard serpent. So Thor is used in iconography. This episode is told in the prose Edda and the poetic Edda, and it goes that Thor goes fishing with Hymer, that's a Jotun, using an ox head for bait, and he catches Jörmungandr, which is the Midgard serpent, who either in some version breaks loose or is cut loose by Hymer, depending on the version. And in the prose Edda, it is told that while Thor was pulling on the line, his feet went through the bottom of the boat. On the runestone here, you can see the scene. So this is Thor. You see his little hammer here. This is the snake which he's trying to fish. I think this might be his line. And then you can see here his little foot there on the bottom, which is going through the boat. So this suggests that pre-Christian symbols remained meaningful for some, even as Christianity spread, and the population lived probably some sort of syncretism, or parts were already Christianized, part had the old faith, and there was like a bit of a combination of all the religious ideas. We also have archaeological finds where used by where these amulets, the hammer amulets, were minted, and we have the forms where the metal was put in. We have there's the Thor amulet, and next to it it's a cross, because they all resemble each other very much. So you can see that you could just go and buy either a Thor amulet or a cross to hang around your neck. So to conclude, runestones vividly reflect the diverse stages of Christianization across Scandinavia. They show how religious identities were negotiated, expressed, and sometimes deliberately blended. By reading both the inscriptions and looking at the iconography, we gain insight into a society undergoing profound cultural and spiritual transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. It's very, very interesting what you presented, and I have a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah.
Probably some other has questions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Should I close the...
Yes, unless then we want to come back to the single monuments,
Okay.
then we ask you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then I just leave it here, or is it?
As you want.
I just leave it like that.
Okay.
That's maybe easier.
I have some questions, so if
Please.
it's okay, I might start possibly. Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. And it's really interesting and exciting world you've taken us to. I've got my first question, which is rather a sign of my relative ignorance in the world of Viking Age history and the tradition of studying that history. The two defining period dates, 793 and 1066, they do sound really rather English side-centered. And this strikes me as rather extraordinary in a way that the Viking Age, though it rather, in my impression, is associated with the other side of the North Sea, right? It still somehow was heavily defined by the way things happened in what we now call the UK or in England. Is this just a kind of tribute to the tradition of studying Vikings, or is that how Viking things are done also in the Scandinavian countries? Do they also think about the same thing as Viking Age using those two dates and why, or if it's so, then why? Yeah.
I've actually never thought about that. That's a really interesting question. I never realized the English, the English bias basically on the dates. So, I mean, it's always hard to like periodize or trying to define a period. So, I think like the first date, if you want, so first the written sources in England and on also continental Europe we have way more than in Scandinavia, because in Scandinavia we also only have runic inscriptions. They are not long texts, so we have only short inscriptions, and so we don't have something like chronicles or annals or something like that. So we use, of course, the historic. If you want to provide a historic periodization, you use the literary sources or historical sources written in the Roman letters. So I think like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, it is such a remarkable entry in the Chronicle, so that it was just used as like a pinpoint of, okay, that's when the Vikings first mentioned. They first come out of Scandinavia, they come to England, and they are first officially recognized as Vikings. And similar, the event of William the Conqueror, which has like shook the world, was also I think it's a good date. So, and it's also used in Scandinavia, I think. So in Scandinavian handbooks about the Viking Age, those two dates are always named. But of course, as I showed you, like you can also periodize by looking at the writing system, and that would be like from Scandinavian point of view. So we have a younger Futhag, and then we have a bit of a tradition. So that's why I always try to show both periods, and depends on from which point of view you're looking. But I think the 793 and 1066, they are just prominent dates. You can just, okay, this is the Viking Age. I can I can memorize this. And it's because we don't have a lot of written sources from Scandinavia from that time, or like chronicles. I think that might be the reason, but really actually never saw that it's such a English point of view.
Yeah, it's just that thank you. I totally agree. I think that that's possibly one of the prominent reasons, right? But also it's a peculiar thing defining oneself or defining the period by some external events, not some monuments or not some objects found close to
Yeah,
home, rather.
I mean the problem is that, for example, I did not get into that, but the Viking Age, or all inscriptions are really, it's difficult to date. So it's always you can't like the C14 method you can't do with stone, so you can also do it with organic materials. So it's really hard to, you only can give a range. And also the dating of the Yellingstone was often debated, and there are like dates which put them earlier or later. So it's always a discussion on dating these monumental inscriptions. So I think if you have a source which says, okay, 793, we start here, that's maybe easier and it's made by historians, the date. So I think they're like different approaches, and the historian approach just had the best advertisement, probably.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe someone else would like to comment on that, or if I may, then I can go on and ask another one.
Please
All
go.
right. The next thing I did notice concerns that beautiful stone which shows the adoration of the Magi. I think it's called the Dinner stone. I
Dinner
may
stone, yeah.
horribly Duna stone. I'm
Duna,
horribly
yeah.
mispronouncing those things. And as a word divider,
yeah,
over there, one can see a range of saltires, well, diagonal, right, crosses over there.
These, yeah.
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 And again, my question might be out of place here, but is that a traditional word divider? Are these observed on other stones, the saltire kind of shape, this diagonal cross, or is that only remarkable characteristic of this particular stone?
No, we have these word divider very often, also when they are not like that Christian. There has been discussion of if these cross-like dividers appear more often when with the increase of Christianity. But I think it's hard to really see a causal effect. There might be some tendencies, but we also have I think we also have those crosses on earlier stones, and they're like the word dividers are. We have these crosses. We have like dots, 2 dots, 3 dots, more dots, 1 dot, no dots at all. So like, yeah. So it's not uncommon, and I don't think that was chosen especially because of the shape and the similarities to the cross. But yeah.
Yeah, that answers my question, I think, in full. And anyway, it's diagonal, right? It's not straight, not the traditional kind of a cross as some of the Anglo-Saxon objects would be, rather at least demonstrate one of those cross-like word dividers. And yeah, for now, I think that I'm more than satisfied. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting. Thank you.
Since we are here in the Dunastone, I have noticed that these two, also the frozen stones and these Dunastones, they have a text that carries a message that is totally different from the message of the figures. So they have assigned to the iconography and to the text two very different. So in the text, so he made the daughter made the bridge in the memory of daughter, and she was the handiest maiden in Netherlands. It's nothing to do with religion, but with death probably. But so the whole scene with the Magi is very interesting, and it is a very symbolic and pregnant. Pregnant. Pregnante, so Italian, it is something different as pregnant. A very symbolic meaning for the Christianity. And this is something similar happens in the other stele, in the frozen stone, where we have a text that is simply the dedication text. If I don't, can you go back?
Yeah, I can go back here. I think it's this one, yeah.
It's meaningful, non pregnante, meaningful. It's okay. So, and also in this case, apart from the cross, we don't understand that we have to do with the symbolic, with the Christian, so religious theme, and it is interesting. So I think it is. I would expect that something is also in the text that they spread to different meanings, and they are complementary, but they mean something else. I wonder also in this case, as in many others, who could read the text. And that's probably so when you are illiterate and you don't know the writings, you understand only the cross practically, or the Magi. It's an interesting thing. So
so the thing is that so who could read, who could write? That's a good question. We don't really know. It's so these monuments were of course they were monuments, they were meant to be seen, and at least in some cases, I don't think it's a monument for everybody, but it's not. In some cases, the content of the inscription is not so important, I think. So it's just important that there is a monument and that you can, since the content of the inscription is often very formulaic, and you know what, like, you get the gist of what is written there. So you know, if you can't read or write, you at least, I think you should know that that is a memorial stone, and that that there's an important family or an important monument there. I think the text itself is probably made for the family itself, and to
even if we have it Christianized here, so we have the word,
it is more like a statement, and again, like, say, okay, here I am, I've made this Christian be, this is our family. I think it has a lot to do with status and who could actually read it then, and that I don't know, probably not so many people, but
but you're right. So it is linked. It is specifically the text belong to the family, and it is a reinforcement of the family, of the clan, of the and the images as iconography speaks to the people, to other attending or visitors. That's very nice.
And I mean, I think the Dünner, they are really huge stones, so they are impressive. So if you walk by them, you know there's something important. So it has, I think, some kind of agency, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could we possibly, if I may just add this bit, could we also refocus or shift the focus from those who were reading it rather to those who commissioned the creation of stone? And in that way, maybe it might be discussed as a kind of a text which was used in the process of what later became, I think, in literary studies known as trauma processing. I mean, we might be witnessing here a stone which was commissioned by a grieving family or a grieving father, for whom it could have been much more important to understand that that way, even though he himself might not have been able to, or was not skilled enough in reading to understand what those words were saying, but as long as he was addressing a supernatural being or the eternity or whoever it could have been addressed at, that could have been a way of alleviating the burden of pain or seeing it daily. That could have been a memorable object for the whole community, because that child could have been, right, or daughter. I think it's
Yep. Yeah, and probably also
a son by the father, possibly, right? This one. Son had the stone raised,
Yeah.
so that's to honor
Yeah.
the father. Then and maybe older man who was well known and held in high esteem by the whole community was remembered, and maybe they would be talking to each other, and from one generation to another generation that could be passed orally, even without being able to read it later.
Yeah,
but
and also some kind of like probably also the component of inheritance. So if we put on the stone, it says I'm a descendant of this person, this important person, so I have the right to be next in line, or I have the power in that area where the stone was commissioned. So if I commission a stone for my dead father, then I have the right to be the next leader or farmer or whatever. Yeah. So I think that, as I said before, these runestone monuments are very complex. So it's really hard to pinpoint to the function. I think they could have many functions, and
But within the historical context, I think your explanation holds the test of scrutiny much more convincingly than mine, which rather sees those people as trauma-prone. But who knows? You never know.
Yeah, who knows? We don't know anything.
Some other questions?
It's possible to keep speaking about all these things. I mean, it's really a really beautiful part of the human kind's experience, and I do like the fact that someone whom you mentioned there compares the hammer, Thor's hammer, at least functionally, right, or even the shape of the hammer resembles the pendant shaped like a cross, which could have been seen as a possible stage between or on the way to accepting the cross as sort of acceptable and legalized, or at least regularized symbol of one's religious faith.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting observation made there.
Chronological, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, it is interesting the chronological uncertainty between the documents who quote Thor and the others who quote God, because sometimes, so I had the impression that we have an interpretation, so a Scandinavian interpretation of God, or vice versa, a Christian interpretation of pre-Christian gods, and it is difficult. We really don't know an idea of the chronology in respect of these two gods. So the chronology of the stones.
So these, for example, so you can date some stones a bit like in a like based on art historic things, and like, for example, this stone can be dated a bit, is probably older, but then we also have I think all these stones are a bit, because these are 1, 2, 3 are from Denmark, so they are a bit older than the ones from Sweden. I don't have the date of that one. So they, in perspective, they might be a bit not as young as the Swedish ones, but it's so difficult to date them and to say, okay, and also the geographically spread and the different processes of how Christianity comes to Scandinavia. It's really hard to get a chronology of the events and when like Thor was invoked and God, and because, for example, Harald Bluetooth, he's baptized 930, which is pretty early for Scandinavia, but that doesn't mean that all Danes were, even though he says not all Danes were Christian. So it's really hard to get like a roadmap of how the events and how Christianity spread and was spread around Scandinavia, and also how the old faith or pagan faith and like the way Thor was used. It's I think so, at least I don't know really how to roadmap that. It's really difficult.
Can paleography be of some help? Is there an evolution of the
sometimes, but also this is because the rune the signs are very very formalized, so they're not really, so paleographical studies are not very helpful because they, and also because they are, and the shape also depends on the material and like who wrote it, so it's really not really to some extent, because at one point newer other runes arise because the language is changing, but also then the no, I don't know the English word. The thing, so if you date based on the graphemes and the phonemes, it's so you get into a vicious circle basically in the circular argument. So it's really, dating is hard of the inscriptions, and so there's some, for example, I'm gonna go to the stone. Wait, that's the Frusön. You can date based on these snakes, which are very prominent in the Swedish rune-stones. There you can actually see, like from a art historical point of view, you can pinpoint them to a certain time frame, because like the shape of the eyes and the form of the mouth and everything changes during time. So that's a good indicator to date the rune stones, but with for example, here with the Swedish ones and the Danish corpus, it's they don't have the rune snakes as we call them, and so here dating, they are a bit older than the Swedish ones that we know, but not so that we can actually get a chronology of how it develops.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Sophie, would you agree that we have to think of a long period, a fairly long period of syncretism?
I think so, and it also depends, I think, a bit on the. I think the developments might be pretty. It depends on the region you're looking at. So and also maybe probably also the what the status of the people who commissioned the monument. So, but I think it's especially in the beginning or the middle, it's sort of a pragmatic pragmatic way of dealing with the different religions and just take some Christian elements and pagan elements and make your own. I think so. I'm not an expert in that, but I think it looks a bit like that.
When I remember or look at Lilla Kopar's book, Gods and Settlers, it's again England, but we find then pretty late in the 12th century, we find Viking crosses in the West. You know, when they came from Norway via Ireland, with pagan symbols, pagan gods, again. You know, in England, this is there are no inscriptions, only the gods, which is that's very interesting because, I mean, England was Christian at that time, you know, by that time through and through. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so. I think they've been like I said before, been in contact with Christianity from a very early point of view, because how could you not? I mean, England is Christian, continental Europe is Christian, so they are traders. They're these big trading centers, so there was contact, and but I think until like especially the church and administration was established in Scandinavia, that takes a long time. So, but I think the ideas and maybe also the rituals and they, I think, triple down or triple up, I don't know, into society, and everybody is doing a bit what he or she wants to do, or what's best, or how he or she was raised. I don't know.
I remember Ethelbert of Kent. He had two altars, one Christian and one pagan, because he thought, you never ever know. And that was I think 600. So
I don't think they were that pious, and like I think there was a lot of pragmatism and power games played a huge role.
Okay. So if there any other questions, we can close our session. And thank you again so much to Sophie for this very interesting presentation of a totally different scenario of what I usually dealing with. So thank you, and it's very welcome. And Sophie, I hope we can stop the registration probably. And